and it wasn't the same. It ruined the whole movie experience.
Good
There you
morning.
go. Good morning, fantasy players.
It's the Sports Addict Daily Fantasy Football Show. This week we're discussing Week 14 and the main slate, as we do on Friday mornings for your Friday commute to and from work. If you're in the Chicagoland area, it's expected to be a bit of a rainy commute out in the
Yeah,
burbs.
heavy rain.
Maybe some snow.
Yeah.
Is it? What's going on out there? I haven't even taken a peek.
I don't know. The drapes are closed right now,
Okay.
so I have no
Right.
idea.
We'll get the weather report here
But
shortly.
the computer did say heavy rain this morning, so.
We are the Sports Addict. We've been podcasting for the better part of a decade, actually all of a decade at this point. My name is Clark Lorensen. This is the fantasy football guy. This is Alfred Ferdinand Larcher III.
Well, good morning. It's a very crappy slate this week. It's a very difficult slate where there's not a lot of ceiling anywhere, which means anything can happen. Your guess is as good as mine, but we'll try to avoid some chalk this week. I think is going to be the key, because really it's anybody's game, and hopefully we can do this show without me losing my voice this week. That helps as well.
Oh yeah.
But if you just look at the flex position, both all your wide receiver, your running back, your tight end, there's 3 players currently projecting over 30 points. That's it. It's Jamar Chase, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it's Justin Jefferson. Everybody else is under 30 points, and there's only about 4 guys projecting over 25. So it's not a really, you don't have to worry about anybody killing you too hard. Now, that doesn't mean a guy doesn't go off for 40 points. It just means it's less likely, and that a lot of your decisions are going to be kind of irrelevant. Like you may go Jamar Chase over Armand St. Brown. There's $100 difference. Armand St. Brown projects better in a better game environment than Jamar Chase against Cleveland, but it's probably not going to make a difference whichever route you go. So what I'm saying is have a lot of variance this week. Try to really mix it up. And I think it's a good week to really focus on fundamentals of tournament play. And that's avoiding chalk, and that's double stacking, where it makes sense. That means running back players. It's just doing everything right and just doing the finer points, the details, the minutia of a proper built team. Finding correlation is going to be key, because the player pool selection itself isn't as important this week. So just something to consider as we talk about some of the positions. You look at the quarterback position, 4 players are projecting over 40 points, or I'm sorry, over 30 points for ceiling projections. Generally, when I talk ceiling because it's tournament play, and that's what I'm looking at. So if I don't say ceiling, that's usually what I'm talking about. If I'm saying just projecting, I'll say projection. But you're looking at Patrick Mahomes, you're looking at Joe Burrow, you're looking at Jalen Hurts, and you're looking at Josh Allen. Josh Allen is projecting the highest. He has the highest projected ceiling at 35 points. But he's not really in a great game environment. They're playing the New York Jets. The Jets do very well against the pass. Sauce Gardner, probably a defensive rookie of the year. He's shutting players down. And it's just not a good game environment. I'm not excited about the play. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty happy and pretty comfortable fading the 10% projected ownership of Justin Fields and applying that to maybe a little Jalen Hurts, who is in a good game environment, but he's only projecting at about 7% ownership versus 10% ownership. So you're not fooling anybody by going to Jalen Hurts, but you are getting away from a Josh Allen. And then the other guy right there at that same price point, well, he's $1,000 less, is Joe Burrow. But those are the 3 projected ceiling guys, and Burrow is projected to be the highest owned player on the slate. So I think the best pivot on the expensive play this week, if you're looking for ceiling, is probably Jalen Hurts. Cash game, you're probably looking at Joe Burrow. save the $1,000 off of 1,300 off of Josh Allen. I think it's pretty safe to say the cash play is going to be Joe Burrow or Kirk Cousins at 6,100 if you're looking to save money. I think those are the two cash plays. But for tournament, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really high ownership on the things you would expect the ownership to be on. Joe Burrow at 7,000, highest projected ownership. A third highest ceiling. He's in that plus 30 points ceiling. But then you got a guy like Jared Goff, who's just in a really good game environment. He's 5,600, and his ceiling is about 25 points. But in a game but in a week where there's only three quarterbacks that have real high ceilings, your guess is as good as anything. So you might as well spend down. So everybody is spending down, and they're going to Jared Goff, because it's in that dome. It's on a field where high fantasy production has been consistent each and every week at Ford Field in Detroit. And you're playing the Minnesota Vikings, who are going to push the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are favored in this game. I'm not sure how or why, but they are favored in this game by just a few points, a handful of points. So this is also, I believe, the one of the highest over unders on the week. So
50, I'm seeing 51.5.
Okay, yeah, that seems
Accurate.
I have it listed as team totals right now, so it's telling me
What, 20?
Detroit's favored at 26 and Minnesota's at 24 projected points.
Wow. So you might be down a
yeah,
point with that.
I have it at 51.5, and it
Okay.
is the highest projected over under on the week. So this week, I mean, it's pretty summed up by you have the number one scoring offense against the worst scoring offense in a game this week in the Kansas City Chiefs and Denver Broncos, and that, I mean, pretty much sums up the entire board. It's just ugly. It's just another ugly week. You have Houston Texans against the Dallas Cowboys at a 17.5 point spread. So it's just like,
Wow.
if you're gonna play in tournaments, I think it's getting off that chalk is just going to be key. And as I said, Joe Burrow top for hot spending up. Jared Goff is the top for spending down. Kirk Cousins, he's the go-to guy for the mid-range price quarterback at 6,100. And then people are playing, of course, Josh Allen as well, just because it's Josh Allen, even though the game environment kind of sucks there. So those are the guys all projecting above 10% ownership. Burrow, Goff, Cousins, Allen. For me, they're probably going to be fades. I don't know if they're going to be full fades, but I'm definitely going to be underweight on them. I wouldn't run more than, say, 5% on each of those guys, and then just try to outsmart the field. Just try to get the guy who is being underowned. And as we talked about for a second ago, I think Jalen Hurts. We saw what he did last week. We know what his ceiling is. It's not a really imposing matchup against the New York Giants. The point spread is only 44.5, but there's not a lot of high point spreads this week. That 51.5 is the clear number one. But there's no other game. Is that right? No other game projecting over 50 points on an over and under. Everything else is in that range of 45
I see
points.
46.5 is the next highest from what I'm looking at. Jeez.
Cleveland, Cincinnati.
Yep. The Battle of Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, you have Dallas, Houston, 44. You have Kansas City, Denver, 44. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, 36. No Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's another thing. There's no Lamar Jackson on this slate.
Oh, man. Yep. Wow.
There's just there's not a lot of like firepower. So yeah, this is the week. This is the week to be a baller tournament player and make those hard decisions and cut the chalk and play. Go balls out on the low owned guys. Geno Smith, 6,200. He's in a fast paced game against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, they're throwing a little bit more. Since they've made some changes in the coaching, and 44.5 over and under. Seattle, You get the players like Lockett, you get DK Metcalf, you get a lot of potent offensive pieces. And then, you can run it back with DJ Moore, who bites you in the ass each and every week. But maybe this is the week. So, I like Geno Smith. I like. I'm down on Danny Dimes. I'm down on Kenny Pickett. Tyler Huntley, I'm not really touching. Tannehill, though. Russ Wilson, just been garbage, just absolute shit. He has the wolf blood and it's failing him. He's not wolfing out. He's like, if you're watching the Wednesday series on Netflix, he's like that girl who just can't wolf out. And maybe this is the week he wolfs out. And if he does wolf out, I want a piece of it, So I'm probably going to do a little bit of Russ Wilson, even though, he's put up 9, 10, 15, 14. Those are his last 5 fantasy football productions. I mean, just absolute shit. He's only gone over 20 points twice this year, once at 20, the other at 27. So, yeah, I mean, just gross. It's just gross. It's just, it's Russell Wilson bad. But he's a guy who has, if this is a week to go off, this might be the spot. A guy who's really underowned this week, who was all the rage last week, who I think is in a really good position, is Trevor Lawrence. Probably going to be my favorite play this week. Here's a guy who last week ate up all the ownership, and he didn't deliver. He was projected for, what was his ownership? Something crazy.
Big last week.
Yeah, like it was like 15% ownership. I think it might have came down to around 10 at the end. But I mean, he was the go-to guy because they're playing Detroit. By the way, Detroit's defense has been playing a little bit better. I mean, that's something to consider in fading that Detroit game.
Apparently, Vegas has considered that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have the Detroit favored over the Minnesota Vikings. But last week against the Detroit Lions in the most fantasy-friendly environment in football at Ford Field, he only put up 14 points. He was projected for 19, and he dudded. But let's not forget 2 weeks ago against the Baltimore Ravens, he put up 28 points.
Right.
He did hit 20 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. 17 points the week before that. Now, here's a guy who has potential with a ceiling. He's 5,700. Yes, it's more comfortable to play. You could get up to 6,200 to Geno Smith. That's a lot more comfortable. But at 5,700, I think Trevor Lawrence is a hell of a play this week. He's right now projecting under 3% ownership. So, I mean, that's the tournament guy right there.
Yep. Yeah.
Do we have any weather in that game?
In which game?
Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee, in Tennessee.
We do have some weather there. It's overcast is the weather with 55 degrees. So weather is a no. 4 mile an hour wind.
Okay, so it's a good weather environment.
There you go.
Tennessee, if you're a fantasy football player, Tennessee is a team you attack through the air. They stop the run, but they're one of the worst teams at stopping the pass. They're a pass funnel. You pass all over them. So Trevor Lawrence is in, like, it's one of those weeks. This happens a lot in fantasy football where there are teams that are clear funnels, where the offense funnels to one position, whether it be a tight end, a team just cannot stop the tight end position. And week after week, we see results, even with shitty tight ends, going off. And then suddenly the field moves away from that, even though there's absolutely no logical reason for that to happen. That is what is happening this week. People just do not want to play Trevor Lawrence after getting burnt last week. And his price is kind of high. I mean, 5,700. If he was, 5,400, the guy would be, I think, about 10% ownership. But that extra $500 is making a difference. It's driving his ownership down in a game that projects at a high pace with a pass funnel on offense. So Trevor Lawrence is a great, great play this week. And we'll talk when we break down games, even though that's not one of the top 3 over and unders this week. We're probably going to move away from that a little bit because of I think you got to get off the chalk this week, and that's going to move us away from looking at over and under. So we'll talk Tennessee Jacksonville and how to approach that game a little bit later. But yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence is probably my favorite quarterback play. Tom Brady against San Francisco. I don't think I want to touch that. Deshaun Watson, was the worst quarterback last week. The guy hadn't played football in 700 days. He comes back and he just duds out. Now he's going up against Cincinnati. Cincinnati has been very good at stopping the quarterback position. So it's not looking good for Deshaun Watson. But, if this guy clicks back to the old Deshaun Watson of 2 years ago, you never know. Mike White has been a great value at 5,500 for the New York Jets. They've started to find a little bit of offense, with Wilson, but they're going up against the Buffalo Bills. And even though he has no ownership, he's under 1% right now. His ceiling probably isn't good enough to get you there. But again, 25 points is going to be good this week. If you can get a quarterback and not spend a lot of money and he gives you 25 plus points, you're printing money. So these are guys you still have to consider. You take some risks underneath. I told you what my risk is going to be. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence. I may throw a little bit of exposure on maybe some of these underneath guys. Probably not Mike White. Probably not Deshaun Watson. Maybe Tom Brady. 5,600. It's still Tom Brady. He's still capable of doing Tom Brady things. But the game projects to be very slow and defense driven. So I'm not really comfortable with that. Mike White. You know what? I think Mike White, I'm coming back to him. I think I talked about him last week as one of my favorite plays.
Yep.
And he actually did okay last week. There wasn't a huge quarterback ceiling last week either. At least it didn't hit. And the guy did put up 22 points. He broke his projection at 5,400. And the week before that, he put up 27 points. So 2 consecutive weeks, he's put up over 20 points. Now, this is a trap game against Buffalo. As I said, Buffalo's defense is stout. They shut down the quarterback position. I believe they're like top 5 against the quarterback position in fantasy football. So it's an ugly, scary play, but this is the week where something strange is going to happen. This is a week where Kenny Pickett could win you $1 million. I'm not going towards Kenny Pickett. I'm not going to play any Kenny Pickett, but just throwing that out there. I mean, there is the slim chance that
in Buffalo, it's going to be 39 degrees. There's a 10-mile-an-hour wind and overcast. There might be a small chance of rain.
So yeah, not great news there.
Yeah.
Which keeps bringing me right back to Trevor Lawrence. All roads seem to be leading in tournament play to Trevor Lawrence. Tyler Huntley actually has a decent ceiling for Baltimore at 5,500. I just thought I'd mention that. Under 3% ownership. His ceiling's about 25 points. He's projecting fairly well. He's projecting better than, say, a Danny Dimes against Philadelphia. He's projecting similar to Deshaun Watson. So just something to consider. Right now, I'm not on him, but I could be talked into playing a little bit of Tyler Huntley. When I start doing some teams later this afternoon, I'm probably going to consider him. But, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy I'm going to have the most exposure on. And I'm going to hope for the best there. So moving to the running back position, same story. Not a lot of ceiling. Running back position this is a week where I don't think you got to get too creative. I think the guys who you think are going to do well are going to do well. I would eat the chalk this week where it's necessary. Derrick Henry, 7,900. He's the highest projected ownership right now at around 30%. Joe Mixon, 25%. DeAndre Swift, not great game environment, but 5,800 against the Minnesota Vikings. He took over lead running back duties last week. It's most likely to continue again this week. So a little bit of risk there. I don't know if I like that risk at 25% ownership, but he is only 5,800. So again, it's probably worth eating. There's nobody that scares me from an ownership perspective. There's nobody over 30% ownership at the running back position. Everything's kind of balanced out nicely. So again, I wouldn't go crazy. Guys I like, Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, they're both playing Houston, and that's another one of those attack situations where every week you just attack, attack, attack. Houston's running game is the run defense. Lovie Smith can't. He just can't coach a team that can stop the run, and this is a situation where both guys are playable. They're both projecting very similar, so I'm going to be starting both. I am probably going to set a rule that I don't want to play both of them on the same team. Although, I won a big tournament. I won my first tournament ever. It's like $7,000 on a dollar team, taking first place in the $1 20 max a couple years ago, and I played. I think it was Latavius Murray and Elvin Kamara. Both of the Saints on the same team, and nobody did that, and they both went off that week. I think they both went for it was like 25, 30 points each. So it was it's what won me that week, because it was so contrarian to the field. Nobody was playing them. So it's not crazy to do like one or two teams, if you're doing 150 max, even a 20 max. I mean, if you want to throw one team that plays both, it is realistic that they both could get there, and
Wow.
nobody would be touching it. But it's
I've been
not.
wondering, Al, I got them both in a league that a must win in a year-long league.
Yeah.
And I've been contemplating playing them both. I don't have much at running back.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have depth, if they're both projecting better than whatever you have, I certainly would.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, but I mean, if one of them gets you 15 and one of them gets you 25, it's very doable against the Houston Texans. That's as good as starting like a Damian Pierce and a stud running back. I mean, it happens. Joe Mixon is the second highest owned running back this week. He's 6,900 going up against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, just a feast spot for him. And then $1,000 less, as mentioned, was DeAndre Swift, who seems like he's his old self, as far as usage is going. So that's another great play. I think Delvin Cook against Detroit is a good play. He's 7,300. Tony Pollard, I mentioned, 6,700. Zeke 61. Zeke cheaper than Pollard and less owned. And the rule of thumb in tournament play is when two guys project very similar, take the cheaper guy and the less owned guy, and if they're both the same guy, that's a smash spot. And that's Zeke Elliott this week. 6,100 versus 6,700. 14% ownership versus 8% ownership. I mean, it's not huge saving, but I think I favor Zeke a little bit over Tony this week. Although my model is really, really liking Tony Pollard, it's actually my highest rated player this week. So, at the end of the day, when I start generating, when I start fighting the optimizer, Tony Pollard might end up beating out Zeke. But I'm going to try to control it where Zeke is going to get he's going to at least get half of the ownership that I'm going to dole out between the two. There is a punt play at running back this week. You don't see this very often this year at DraftKings. DraftKings has been very responsible pricing running backs, even backup running backs. But last week, James Cook was the number one running back of the Buffalo Bills. And if that continues, 8% ownership, he's 4,600. So you have a running back who's under 5K. You get a lot of savings there. You pair him with Joe Mixon, and you're getting two stud running backs for about $12,000. It's going to give you a lot of room to play the rest of the board. I do like Miles Sanders as well. I like Miles Sanders a lot. He's my favorite running back play this week. 6,200 going up against the Giants. Philadelphia should be controlling that game. They are favored by a touchdown. It's a good game environment. The Giants have been struggling against the run. I think it just sets up really nicely for Miles Sanders. I don't think it sets up as nicely for Saquon Barkley. He's 8K, but he's coming in at about 5% ownership. So the field agrees with that statement, which is why I think he is actually pretty playable because of that fact. So I like playing a little bit of Barkley, although I'm going to kind of limit my exposure. And then Nick Chubb at 7,800, under 3% ownership. Um, it's very possible that Cleveland just gets blown out and Nick Chubb becomes kind of irrelevant. So there's some risk involved there. But, Nick Chubb's been balling, and I think it's a good spot. So those are my running back plays right now. And usually, like on a Friday,
what's the Chubb ceiling?
he's at about 24 points for a ceiling. Where the highest ceiling on the board is 28 with Derrick Henry. So you're talking about a 4-point difference between Henry and Chubb.
Okay.
And you're saving
price.
Yeah, I mean, not much. It's $100 difference between Chubb and Henry. And yes, I'd rather play Mark. I almost call him Mark Henry. Sexual chocolate,
strongest man in the world,
the strongest man in the world, the big dog. But Derrick Henry, I would much rather play Derrick Henry. But the field is playing Derrick Henry. So if you want to pivot, Nick Chubb is a great pivot play in tournament. Not a great cash play in cash. I think I'm going big dog for sure. I'd probably play Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon. I think it's doable to play both of them this week. Or, go down to James Cook and Derrick Henry and then get a little more equity at the running back or tight end spot because, there's only really one tight end. Actually, that's not true. Andrews is a good play this week. So those are all my running back plays. Usually at this point in the week, I'm at like 20 running backs, and I'm fighting to narrow it down. Right now, I'm sitting at 11 running backs, and I'm very comfortable with that. And I'm probably going to get it down to about 7 by Sunday. So I feel like I have my biggest wins when I really limit running back exposure, and I don't accidentally fade the guy who goes off. And easier said than done, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 6 guys projecting between 20 and 24 points. It various price range from 58 to 7,800 to 8,000. So 58 to 8,000 of those 6 guys. So there's definitely a couple of them that are worth cutting in that price point. The scary thing is some of those guys are Nick Chubb, Barkley, and Swift, which, they're hard to fade because if somebody does go off for 30 points, those guys' names are very possible. They're not scrubs. Like the James Cook play, if he was projecting in that, if he wasn't so cheap and he was in that price range, I mean, that would be easy fade. But yeah, maybe the probably the best fade there is going to be DeAndre Swift. He's eating up all the ownership at that price range, and there are routes. We've seen it where Jamal Williams gets the touchdowns, and Swift just kind of he'll get you 15 points or so, and you just need more at it at the price point this week. But he is cheaper than Zeke Elliott. And, I think Swift is the better play than Zeke Elliott, even though, as we talked about, Zeke Elliott's in a pretty good position. But I think I'd rather spend an extra $400 and just get to Miles Sanders and fade DeAndre Swift. We know Miles Sanders is going to be involved in the game plan of the Philadelphia Eagles. And Jalen Hurts, as I talked about, one of my favorite spend-up plays at the position this week. And I think you can – let's actually check correlation between Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. They do have positive correlation. So that means, when one has a good day, the other has a good day. It's not huge. It's a half-point correlation, which isn't that exciting. It's not like, oh, my God, it must play, but it's not negative. And usually when you're talking about quarterback, running back, it's a negative correlation. Actually, Devontae Smith, for example, has bad correlation with Miles Sanders. So if you're playing Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, fade Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown actually has positive correlation with Miles Sanders. So Sanders, Brown, Hurts would be a decent stack there. I know that's kind of price prohibitive, so you'd have to really get cheap at some other. You'd have to get thin at some other spots, but it's doable, especially with the run backs being the New York Giants. You could do a cheap play there. Wide receiver, we'll talk about more of those when we start talking stacks, but the big plays this week are Justin Jefferson, Armand St. Brown, Chase, Diggs. And then it gets really thin. Now, after those guys, you're talking about 25-point ceiling guys, like the rest of the field. So it's not, it's very cramped, with very different price points, and ownership. Garrett Wilson's not in a great spot this week. I mean, they're going up against Buffalo. He's eating a lot of the ownership. He's at 20% ownership in a week where ownership is very spread. As we've said before, it's a very spread at every position. So there's not a massive chalk player this week. So when you're talking about 20% ownership, most weeks you're like, it's not a big deal. Well, this week it kind of is, because those are the high owned guys. So a Garrett Wilson is probably a guy worth fading. Whereas, Armand St. Brown is the highest projected owned player on the board. His price point, though, has finally got to a point where you could start considering fading him. When he was when he was in that $7,000 range, you couldn't fade him because the ceiling was just too damn high. Last week the dude was 7,100, and I faded him, and it was a mistake. I faded him because ownership projected really high, and I didn't do a full fade on him, but I definitely was underweight on the field, and he went off for 37 points.
Wow.
So I mean that bit me. I had a bad week last week, and I could really much chalk it up to being too thin on Armand St. Brown. But this week he's 7,800. He's damn near the highest priced wide receiver on the slate. And, when you start talking about that, I think I'd rather have Jamar Chase over Armand St. Brown. I don't think that's a crazy statement. Jamar Chase is $100 more now than Armand St. Brown with half the ownership. So I think Armand St. Brown is a pretty good fade this week, and putting all that ownership on Jamar Chase and just hoping Jamar Chase, outplays Armand St. Brown when it comes to point totals at the end of the day. And we know that's possible. They're playing Cleveland. I mean, it's doable. So, yes, Armand St. Brown he's playing in a dome. Yes, it has the highest over-under on the week. Yes, he has great connection with Goff. I mean, there's a lot of positives for Armand St. Brown.
Yeah, but that weather's going to be fine there in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I like that. I like that Chase pivot a lot. And then he's catching ownership. He's a little bit cheaper, but you have CeeDee Lamb going up against the Houston Texans, and Dallas is going to run a lot in that game, but they very easily get him his 100 yards, and the guy's been consistent. He just projects green every week. He has 3 red duds when I'm looking at his his stock profile. 7 targets, 11 targets, 5 targets, 15 targets, 7 targets, 77 yards, 150 yards, 45 yards, 106 yards, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 touchdown. He has been struggling a little bit getting the touchdowns, but he is hitting that 100 yards. He's had 20 points in the last 2 consecutive weeks. He's hit 20 points. And again, this is a week where it's very thin. So a guy like CeeDee Lamb is probably a pretty good play. He is catching a little bit of ownership. He's at about 20%. So, I mean, that's a concern. Whereas, DK Metcalf is only at about 8% ownership, and he projects pretty similarly, as does T. Higgins. Christian Kirk's a really good play this week. Ownership is down. Why don't we just talk about that? Well, we'll talk tight end, and then we're going to jump into Jacksonville, Tennessee, because I think that's the game to attack this week. Mark Andrews, I don't have the data in front of me, but I believe last year, I know it was true, when Lamar Jackson was out, Mark Andrews had better games than when Lamar Jackson was in. He had good games with both situations, but he actually did better with Lamar Jackson out. And a lot of that could be contributed to the fact that you have a quarterback who's going to check it down to the best receiver on the field. The best receiver on the field also playing underneath is Mark Andrews. He's better than any other wide receiver that they have, and he also has a better chance at scoring a touchdown without Lamar Jackson running one in than with Lamar Jackson, on the field. Now, Mark Huntley actually is a pretty good running quarterback, so there is some risk there. But or Tyler Huntley, but
Works fine.
yeah, I think I think he's a really good play at 6,500, especially with as weak as the wide receiver position is this week, and really the ceiling in general is so weak. I think Mark Andrews is a pretty good play at 6,500. Now he's only projecting for a ceiling of 15 points, which isn't very enticing. T.J. Hawkinson in a revenge game going up against the Detroit Lions, who traded him this year, mid-season at 5,100 is a very enticing play. Probably he's my favorite play at the tight end position. I believe in the revenge game narrative. I've seen it play out so many times that it's something I actually really consider and put value in.
Will
And I think
that drive his ownership to the higher end?
Yeah, I mean, he is projecting at 16% ownership right now, which is the second highest. Greg Dulcich of the Denver Broncos, 3,400, projecting for 16 points. So he's projecting better than, Mark Andrews. Greg Dulcich, 3,400. He's at 31% ownership. That's an easy fade. If you're playing tournaments, you absolutely have to fade Dulcich.
Fade Dulcich. Got it.
Yeah. You're talking about the Denver Broncos have a team total of 17 points. So, we're not talking about fireworks here. We're talking about a dud of a game, and yeah, they're gonna utilize him. He's probably the best, receiver they have, because that team is so banged up. But at 30% ownership, man, it's a recipe for disaster. You're putting way too much equity into a player that has produced, 14 points last week, 3 points prior, 7 points prior, 2 points, 12 points, 11 points, 12 points. Now, obviously, this is the best situation he's been in, but he's had over 8 targets 2 times this year. One time against the New York Jets, he had 9 targets. He caught 6 balls for 51 yards. He put up 11 Draft King points. Last week against the Baltimore Ravens, 8 targets, 6 catches, 85 yards, 14 Draft King points. Now, at a player that's 3,400, yes, 14 Draft Kings points is pretty good. But when you really break down the tight end position, you could get that from somebody else. And there is a realistic chance that, he takes a dump and he's not the guy. Noah Fant is projecting really well with no ownership at 3,100. So he's cheaper than Dulcich. And let me just kind of see what he's been doing here. 5 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets. Last week, he gave you 14 fantasy points at 3K. So he was the better play last week against the Rams. He did put up 6 points, 6 points, 14 points. So, he's either going to give you, 5 to 6 points, or he's going to give you 14 to 15 points. But great pivot off of the chalk, which again is what you're going to be looking for. Daniel Bellinger back with the Giants, 3,300. Philadelphia does give up the tight end position. 5% ownership, 3,300, same price as Dulcich. Actually $100 less than Dulcich. Great pivot. Another great pivot. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of smart moves that will get you off the chalk this week when you pivot Dulcich if you're a smart player. And I think that's just a clear, easy tournament pivot. Now, cash game, fire him up. It's probably the right move there. But Hawkinson, I think, he's only projected for ceiling 18 points, but the guy could ball out in the revenge game. He could just ram it, just shove it down the throat of the Detroit Lions. It reminds me of that song by Cupcake that we won't get into, but he did put up 42 points against the Seattle Seahawks. Now I believe that was a game where the Lions didn't have anybody playing except him, but he did have a 42-point game this year. So Hawkinson, good play as well at 5,100. And if you punt at running back, or if you punt at wide receiver, I mean you could get there. Like I said, I do like Mark Andrews. I think he's going to be underplayed. He's going to be under-owned, less than 1% ownership, and
Okay.
I think he could ball. So,
All right.
yeah, so that's the tight end position. So now just kind of looking at some games here. We got about 20 minutes. We can kind of see
I,
how to attack some of these games.
I had never heard of Cupcake, Al.
Yeah, 2Ks.
And then I looked it up. Oh, it is 2Ks. Yeah, I looked it up, and I think I see the song that you were talking about.
Yeah. The kids like that song. I don't know.
Do they?
It's a little vulgar. I thought the WAP was a vulgar song, and then this one,
Yeah.
this one's got the kids, but the kids sing along. They know the shit,
Okay.
and
All right.
they
Then.
like it.
Oh, vulgar kids, I tell you.
Yeah, the music these days, my God.
My Lord.
Yeah. Something about a throat. It's a throat song. I can't think of the name of the song. Oh, she's from Chicago, Cupcake. I didn't know that.
It's Deep Throat, Al. This is
Deep Throat's the name of the song. Yes.
Yeah, this is the stuff that everybody's getting in on.
It's a catchy tune, but it's very vulgar.
Okay.
But now that I know she's from Chicago, she's cool. She's cool with me.
I'm not gonna play it because of the censors,
Yeah. It's a good idea. But I'm down with the Cupcake. So Jacksonville, Tennessee, this is my favorite game. This is the game I'm going to be attacking. Every week Ed reminds me that, the Tennessee Titans are a pass funnel. And every week I just kind of ignore it and don't attack the pass funnel as much as I should. This week I'm going all in.
Okay.
As I said earlier, Trevor Lawrence, under-owned. And so are most of the pieces in this game. And the prices are very appealing. I do not like the Tennessee Tide. I do not like Ryan Tannehill. I don't think I'm going to be approaching it from any side but the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I'm going to be looking at Trevor Lawrence. Travis Etienne, a little banged up, but I think he's going to play a role in this game. He's 6,400. Let me just check correlation with him and Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, that's what I thought. He has negative correlation with Trevor Lawrence. So if you're building game stacks, I probably won't be playing Travis Etienne in this game stack. I'll be playing him outside of the game stack in other game stacks, but I think I'm just going to be attacking this game through the pass catchers of Lawrence. So guys I really like. I think Christian Kirk is a must play. He projects very well. 6,600. He's a little expensive, but he's in a really good spot here. And another guy, he's under 10% ownership. He's sitting around 5% ownership. 3 weeks ago he put up 34 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. 4 weeks ago he put up 21 points against the Raiders. Last week, against Detroit, puts up 19 points. He did dud out against the Baltimore Ravens 2 weeks ago. It's kind of interesting. Games they lose, he puts up a lot more points than games they win. Now, they are projected to lose this game. So Christian Kirk, I mean, it's lining up. All the stars are aligning. When I do like a single entry tournament, the last couple of weeks I haven't felt very confident in my gameplay. I went with Chicago last week. I went with Justin Fields, but he was too expensive, and I knew he was too expensive, and I knew it would bite me, and it did. This week I feel very confident, and my biggest win this year, I took 12th in a single entry out of like 6,000 players. I felt really good about it. And it was a Justin Fields week, but Justin Fields is very cheap and very unowned. That's where I'm feeling with Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if he's going to get steamed. I mean, there's a chance other people are thinking exactly like I am, that this is a really good play, and it's just weird that nobody is attacking it. But yeah, I like Trevor Lawrence, and then I like Kirk, and I would double stack it. So now you're looking at Marvin Jones, who's been playing really well. Not really well, but I mean, Marvin Jones has been playing uh, okay. Uh, but you don't need much from that third piece. You're just hoping they get there. He's 3,800, so you're not investing a lot in Marvin Jones. Uh, yeah, I mean the guy's put up 2, 11, 4, and 9. 9, he did do a 20, 2 nines and a 20, and an 11 are his best games this year. But he's also produced 4, 2. So I mean he'll either get you 10 points plus, or he's going to get you under 5. Um, but the price is worth it, and the situation is worth it. I do like Marvin Jones Jr. Zay Jones is getting a lot of ownership. He's the highest projected owned player of anybody in this game, which is crazy. Even Travis Etienne has less ownership projected than Zay Jones. It's not a lot. It's 13%, but at 4,700, I think he's the fade here. I think again, I don't think I'm playing ETN in the game stack. I think Zay Jones is where everyone else is going, who is going to play this game stack, and I'm not comfortable with it, so I'm going to fade it. And he did get 7 targets last week. He only caught 2 of them. 7 targets. He only caught 2 balls. He gave you 3 DraftKings points. Now the reason people like him is 2 weeks ago against the Baltimore Ravens. He had 14 targets, caught 11 of them for 145 yards, gave you 30 DraftKings points. The week prior to that, he had 10 targets, 8 catches for 68 yards, 14 DraftKings points. So he's not a very good football player, is the deal. Even when he gets a lot of targets, only once has he balled. Only once this year. And again, it was 2 weeks ago. So it's fresh in everybody's mind. And that's why they're going to Zay Jones. People just like playing Zay Jones. But Zay Jones is a shitty play, especially at 13% ownership. So I'm fading Zay Jones, which means I got to find another piece, and it's probably Evan Ingram. He's catching a little bit of ownership. He's at about 6% ownership. He's 3,300. He's projecting for about 12-point ceiling, 8-point projection. So it's about the same as every other running back in that price point. Let's kind of look at what he's produced this year. I don't think he's had a great year. Yeah, I mean, it's ugly. He did have 7 targets last week, caught 5 of them for 30 yards and a touchdown, gave you 14 points against the Lions. But prior to that, it was 1 point, 4 points, 1 point. Then you get to the 15, the 10, the 9, the 12. So he's streaky, and just like every other tight end, man, it's like they're either going to get you a touchdown and you're going to be happy, or they're not, and it's going to suck. And, that's just a consistent. So why overthink it? Why overthink it? You pivoting off of the chalk, and you're getting a tight end that's capable of doing just as well as the guy everybody else is playing that we've talked about isn't worth playing. So, yeah, I'm probably going to do Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram with Trevor Lawrence. I'm probably going to do a lot of that, like 20%. Like that's going to be my key piece. I'm going to bank a lot of this week on that stack, and I'm going to run it back probably. It's cheap enough where you could do Derrick Henry. I don't like a lot of the Tennessee players. As a matter of fact, right now I have every one of them X'd out. But because this is going to be my game stack, I'm probably going to have to make some concessions and probably play like Austin Hooper, who's projecting fairly decent. He is catching some ownership at 9%. I'm definitely going to be playing Derrick Henry as the run back wherever I can. Every piece is so cheap that, 7,900 at running back is going to be easy to do. He is getting, as we talked about, he's one of the higher owned running backs, but like I said, it's worth eating this week. If I'm going to punt, I'm probably going to go to Chizuzumokawawu. So
say that again.
Chizuzumokawawu.
Okay.
The tight end for the Tennessee Titans at 2,700. Yep. I think we're just going to call him CO. I think Co is going to be a pretty good play. Nice pivot. He projects the same as Evan Ingram, and he's cheaper. So, it's just another example of how shitty the tight end position is this week. Now, you do have two tight ends for Tennessee. You have Coe and you have Hooper, and they both project the same. So that's just going to split the ownership between the two. It is interesting that between the two Tennessee Titans tight ends, you have about 16% ownership projected between the two because they're both projecting for ownership because they both project exactly the same. And as I said earlier, the smart play is play the cheaper guy, play the guy with less ownership. The cheaper guy in this situation, Austin Hooper's 29, Coe is 27. Hooper's at about 10% ownership, and Coe is at about 6% ownership. So Coe's the better play. Now, like I said, I'm running a lot of teams of this Trevor Lawrence stack. So I'm ultimately probably going to split my exposure to both of them. So I'm going to have either way. But yeah, I like all three tight ends in this game. Ingram for Jacksonville, Hooper, and Coe. Okonkwo. Yeah, I need to learn that guy's name if he's going to be good. So yeah, so that's my favorite game. So let's look at the Detroit Minnesota game. I do think this is a good game to fade, but
seems like it's going to be a popular one, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be the most owned game, and it's gonna be very popular. It's gonna be owned. There is a lot of ceiling in it though, so it's not worth totally fading, but it is worth considering doing so. Both quarterbacks project very similar. The cheaper of the two is Jared Goff, and their ownership is pretty much the same. Jared Goff has like 1% better ownership, higher ownership than Kirk Cousins. So it's a coin flip. I mean, you could approach this game from either way, either side. I think there's a double stack that's doable in both situations. Checking Jared Goff's correlation, he does correlate positively with DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift does catch a lot of balls, so that makes sense. So Swift, Armand St. Brown, all doable in a stack. You probably can't do both of those guys together, but it's worth playing. I may have a little Jamal Williams just in this game, just in like a few plays, but given the fact I'm probably fading most of the game, most of my exposure to this game, I'm probably just gonna not play Jamal Williams. It's just not. I think I want the guys with the real ceiling, and I think that's Swift, Armand St. Brown. I like DJ Shark a lot. I think he's a good play. He's under 5% ownership, so he's a great pivot in this game. The guys catching all the ownership are pretty obvious. It's Armand St. Brown, it's Swift, and I would guess Hawkinson, but I'm not seeing him here.
Yeah, right. I would think.
Yeah, you would think so. Like, he's not even listed. Weird. Oh, that's right, because he plays for the Minnesota Vikings.
There you go.
Yeah.
Traded.
He's traded, right. So basically, it's Swift and St. Brown are catching all the ownership. So I imagine they are playable in that game stack if that's where all the ownership is going. And I guess Swift is only 5,800. I keep thinking he's in the 6K range, but he's under 6K. So I guess you can do it. It's probably a poison sentence with ownership. Whereas if you play St. Brown and say DJ Shark, or you play DJ Shark and Swift, or you play Armand St. Brown and Josh Reynolds, I think that's the way to go. Nobody has ownership over 5% in this game stack outside of Swift and Brown and St. Brown. So, yeah, I mean, this game that's a little more promising to me. That makes me more excited to play this game stack. If the field isn't double stacking this game outside of Swift and Brown, like there is there are pivots within this stack to be contrarian and give yourself a little bit of an advantage. So it's doable. It's doable. And then, Jamal Williams is just kind of a wild card. The guys I'm playing, as mentioned, I am going to do a little bit of Josh Reynolds. I don't think it's a great spot for him. And you have the rookie, Jameson Williams, getting more and more snaps. Their first-round draft pick who's been injured most of the year. I think he got eight targets. Not 8 targets, but I think he was in 8 plays last week. 8 targets seems too high. He had 8 of the 76 snaps. He had eight snaps and only 1 target. So I don't know when they're going to start using him more. Obviously, he's a guy that they want to get more involved.
Yep.
And I think the guy who he eats into is going to be Josh Reynolds. But I'm still playing Josh Reynolds at 3,400. I'm just going to limit his exposure. He's under 1% right now. DJ Shark, I think, is a very safe play at 4,300. Just kind of look at his games. 6 targets last week, 5 targets the week prior. 98 yards last week. Just missed the 100-yard bonus by 2 yards. Gave you 14 Draft King points. Involved in 64 of 76 snaps. So, yeah, DJ Shark's definitely a good play. And then the tight end situation, Brock Wright is their best option there, but I'm not playing him. So, the rest of the pieces are so under-owned that I'm not going to have to take the risk at Brock Wright to get contrarian. Because Shark and Reynolds are already contrarian enough that they're worth playing.
That's good. Yeah. That I like that style. Of course, that game is in the Dome. We've talked about it. They're the highest over-under at 51.5, according to Vegas. Maybe, Al, next week you might have to watch out for Baker Mayfield, huh? Comeback kid.
Yeah, maybe. He looked all right last night. He's still garbage.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Just wow. Yep.
It was a nice comeback win. On the other side, Adam Thielen at 4,900 is getting a lot of ownership, and I assume it's because people are going to be double stacking him with Jefferson because it's very affordable. Justin Jefferson, the highest priced wide receiver on the board at 9K. Yeah, I mean, it's a good play. I don't love it. As a matter of fact, I'm fading Justin Jefferson outside of this game. I think I'm just going to play him in this game stack if I am playing him at all. Hawkinson, I think, is a better play at 16% ownership at 5,100. Not a better play as far as ceiling, but just cost efficiency. At 9K, you need at least 30 points. I mean, you got to get those 30 points really to justify it. And it's just going to be hard to do.
Yep. That's a lot of points, Al. A lot of points.
He put up 18 points last week, but of course it was against, Sauce and the New York Jets. He did put up 32 against New England, 6 against the Cowboys. I think he got injured in that game. Although, they just didn't have a lot of snaps. Slow paced. He did put up 38 points against the Buffalo Bills and 28 points against the Commanders. So it's in him. Like, we know that. It's one of the best. It's arguably the best receiver in football. But at 9K, and 20% ownership, it's I just like it. I like attacking this game from the Detroit side and playing the Jared Goff, Armand St. Brown, and stacking him with like Marvin Jones, and then running it back with, say, Adam Thielen would be like a good play at 4,900, but 20% ownership, man. It's like the potential of him failing is higher than the potential of him succeeding. The potential of him hitting his average is probably pretty high. The potential of him hitting his ceiling is probably not that high. So when 20% of the field thinks that he's going to hit his ceiling, like, it's smart to get away from it. I mean, here's his last couple games. 4 DraftKings points, 21 DraftKings points. Okay, he hit there against the Patriots. 4 DraftKings points, 9, 12, 15, 6. Like, I realize he's very cheap. But yeah, like I just don't like the Adam. I just don't like the Adam Thielen play much this year at all. It just hasn't been getting there. The problem is KJ Osborne at 3,500 isn't worth playing. I don't think, at least. If you're doing a lot of exposure to the Minnesota side, by all means, play a little KJ Osborne. But if you're only if you're playing a handful of games or something, I'm not risking it with KJ Osborne. As a matter of fact, I'd rather be a Thielen at that point. So for me, the double stack is Hawkinson and Jefferson, but it's expensive. I mean, now you're spending 5,100 at the tight end position. So unless you find some cheap wide receivers, you're probably gonna have to play double tight end to get there, and that's not fun. Yeah, Delvin Cook. Let's see if he correlates with Kirk Cousins. I'm gonna guess no, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. Actually, he has pretty good correlation with Kirk Cousins. So Delvin Cook's in play, but he's 7,300. And then you absolutely cannot play Justin Jefferson. You just can't afford it. So you're talking like Delvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Kirk Cousins double stack, and running it back with St. Brown. Like, it's not very appealing. As a matter of fact, the Minnesota side's really ugly. Because the plays you want to make, the players you want to play, just are too expensive. So you're forced playing the players you don't want to play, and it's ugly. That's why Adam Thielen's so well owned, because he's cheap. and from a data aspect, he makes sense. But it's fucking Adam Thielen,
Yep.
Like, I just would rather so much play the Detroit side.
That sounds like it. Yeah.
And then just running it back with like one of these players. All right, we'll do one more game. Do you got a favorite game here, Clark?
Sure. Cincinnati.
Oh, that's a good one. Sure. All right, so you got the Bengals and you got the Cincinnati Browns. Yeah, I'm just gonna look at some of these other games here.
Sure.
I think Seattle. We'll talk about the Cincinnati Cleveland, but I just want to run through everything. Seattle Cleveland, I think, is worth approaching from the Geno side. I'm sorry, Carolina. Seattle, Carolina is worth approaching from the Cleveland side or from the Seattle side. San Francisco, Tampa Bay, I'm not really interested in. Kansas City, Denver. Kansas City could steam. They can put up a lot of points really fast against San Francisco. Although San Francisco defense is solid. So I don't like that game either. Kansas City, Denver. That's, like I'm all over the place here.
Yep.
Dallas, Houston. I mean, it's like good teams versus bad teams everywhere you look. I can see Dak Prescott in doing like a nice Dallas stack against Houston. I think that's playable, but it's not exciting. Jets Philly is kind of exciting. Like that outside of the Cincinnati Browns game, I do kind of like the Jets. I'm sorry, the Giants, Philadelphia Eagles, and going with the Philadelphia Eagles stack. AJ Brown hurts. It's expensive. I probably would single stack and stop right there. And then, run it back with, God, who do you run it back with? On, you might not even do a run back on the Giants.
Well,
Bellinger. Bellinger is who I would run it back with at the tight end spot, which would save you a little bit of money so you can get, AJ and Hurts. All right, so let's look at Cincinnati. I think you're spot on that this is the other game that's worth talking about. Can you play the Watson side? I mean, that's the question. Can you play the Cleveland side? And you're taking a huge risk. This game is in Cincinnati, right? Is there any weather, anything like that going on?
No, there's not much.
Yeah, you mentioned
there was what's that?
Yeah, I remember now. You did mention we did talk about it. Yeah, 6,400 for Deshaun Watson. I'm not going there. Under 1%. He's at about 1% ownership. So it's worth considering in a tournament, but it's not something I'm looking at or excited about. I do like the Nick Chubb play at under 3% ownership, and then we know that Armani Cooper is not great on the road. He has terrible road splits. He's 6,200, but it's not a great spot for Peoples Jones, which he's been playing really well lately, but not a good spot. Um, yeah, so I don't really like anything going on here on the Cleveland side.
Wow.
No.
So if
No.
I'm playing this game, I'm only playing the Cincinnati side, and I'm probably going to run it back with either Peoples or Cooper. The tight end's like a split situation where it's Harrison Bryant or Farrell Brown. Bryant, I guess Bryant at 2,800 is worth considering as a run back as well. So Harrison Bryant, Cooper, Peoples, those would be my run back from the Cleveland side. I'm not playing the Cleveland stack. So Cincinnati, this is a great, great, great spot for Tyler Boyd.
Okay.
The Cincinnati Bengals tight end is injured, right? They're wheeling out Mitchell Wilcox as the starting tight end this week. I think that means there's going to be a lot more production going to Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd has 1% projected ownership. He's 5K. He's not super cheap, but let's face it. You can't play Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T Higgins. It just doesn't work. You can't afford it. Higgins is 7K, Jamar Chase is 7,900, and Burrow is 7K. So it's just not cost efficient to do that. So you have to find a pivot, and that pivot is clearly going to be Tyler Boyd. So I think it's really easy. It's Joe Burrow, and then play Chase or play Higgins, and then pair it with Boyd. Looking at Boyd's correlation, I think that's kind of an interesting thing to pull up here. He correlates really well with Joe Burrow. He correlates really well with Jamar Chase. He correlates negatively with Joe Mixon and T. Higgins.
Interesting.
So if you're looking at a data aspect, if you want to approach this game purely from an analytical side, you play Burrow, you play Chase, you play Boyd.
Yep.
And then you run it back with whoever you want on the other side. Those three guys I mentioned. Mixon, of course, is in a smash spot, 6,900. I just don't know that you could play him in the game stack. He's a great play outside of the game stack.
Yep.
He does correlate slightly positively with Joe Burrow. He does have positive correlation with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So he's one of those guys where you can play him in a game stack. I just think if it turns into a game where he's dominating and he's taking the touchdowns, it's really going to hurt the pass catchers. So you don't want him to have. You want to kind of bet on him having an okay game, and him hurting your opponents who play him outside of the game stack, and then your guys going off within the game stack. That's the road to success for the Cleveland game stack this week. Or I'm sorry, the Cincinnati game stack this week. I like it. I like it a lot. I think I'm going to focus on 5 game stacks this week and play them at 20% each, which is really high. But when you hit 2 of those 3, you'd probably ball in money this week. So I'm probably going to go 20% on, say, Trevor Lawrence, 20% on Burrow, 20% on Goff, and then I'm going to have to kind of think about those next 2 plays. I'm probably going to go one high stake. Well, Hurts. I'm going to play Hurts, and then I'm really going to have to consider that last spot of who I'm going to play, and that's going to depend a lot on ownership. It might come down to a Dak Prescott because I don't think anybody's going there this week. But yeah, Dak. Oh, Dak has had about 10% ownership, so 6,500. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to pick 5 quarterbacks and then build 20% game stacks around all of them. And I think the Burrow one is very easy. I don't think I'm going to be screwing around too much. I'm probably like, if I'm doing 20%, it's probably going to be, 5% on mixing. No, I'm going to fade Mixon in the game stack. So it's probably going to be like 15% on Chase Boyd and then 5% on Higgins Boyd as the game stack there. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, are you doing 150 lineups this week?
No,
Is
that's
that the
what I
game
have.
plan?
I'm going to give it a shot, man. We'll see how today goes with the way that I'm feeling. Like,
All
I
right.
think
Well,
I am gonna be home. I got some work to do from here, but man,
if you have any questions, you can ask me. If you need some tips on running 150.
thank you. I will hit you up. I would like to do it. Absolutely.
And that includes the
Yeah.
listeners too. If they want to hit me up on Twitter, just drop them in my DMs at Larcher Than Life.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, Al, I will hit you up. I'll find time to do it, especially if my oldest can go to school today. As you know, she had the Eber flu. She type A, the influenza A. She tested positive for. Has been out of school all week. That's we're flying, Al. Like, it's masks are off, and man, the flu is everywhere. So
yeah,
just saying, yeah, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm in. I will talk to you definitely about building a 150 stack here.
cool.
Let's see. It was really, thinking about it when you opened up the show, you're like, what a strange week. Kind of a rough week. And I'm like, oh, great. So I'm going to go 150 on the rough week. But what you brought up, there's quite a few good things in there.
Yeah, I've talked myself into liking this slate. Now that we finished the show, I've talked myself into liking it because I know where I'm going. Last week I had no direction. Like, I didn't feel anything. Where this week I really feel strongly about the Trevor Lawrence play. And I feel comfortable with the Joe Burrow play. I feel like I can outsmart the chalk with the Jared Goff play. So there's just a lot of things to do, and it feels like a very good week to be contrarian and a very good week to follow the rules. So, that's how we started. That's how we end. Just do the right things this week. Be a contrarian player, and double stack, and keep your ownership in check.
That's great, man. Al, thanks for week 14, breaking it all down. The listener out there, thank you so much for listening on your commute, watching on YouTube, watching on Twitch, watching on Facebook Live, and then listening wherever you get your podcasts. This thing will be available here shortly. Tell your friends to download us if they want all that info, all that great info from Alfred Ferdinand Larcher III.
Peace.
Anything else, bud?
No, I'm going to go back to watching, some cop dramas and let's see what goes on from there.
Still on that new Criminal Minds?
Yeah. I just finished. I slept through the last episode. It's not very good.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give it a shot. All right, brother.